Off a line of more than 50 Iraqi tanks. They reportedly were used by the Republican Guard, Iraq's top flight personnel. American and French forces have swept across Iraqi territory around Kuwait's border. The goal is Basra, a border city, to block any escape by Iraqi personnel. A major highway runs from Kuwait City to Basra, but American B-52 pilots are dropping bombs on the road to make that 75-mile trip difficult. Allied forces in Kuwait and Iraq say resistance from Iraqi troops has been surprisingly light. Mike Chinoy reports some troops found the going a bit tougher today, mostly because of the weather.
On day 3 of the ground war, strong winds and heavy rains across much of Kuwait and Iraq hampered the Allied advance, grounding the Chinook helicopters of the 18th Airborne, which ferries supplies to the 101st and 82nd Airborne, trapping vehicles in the mud, uprooting tents, making progress on foot a slow and messy slog.
Right now we've had wind gusts that have been reaching up to like 30 knots. We've had visibilities that have gone down to about a half a mile visibility. And with that, we've been forecasting light to occasional moderate turbulence, which of course is going to have an effect on aircraft. So are the visibilities and so are the gusty winds.
Imagine it put us on hold for a while until it's over.
But by no means entirely on hold. Despite the weather, the Allies have now managed to establish logistics bases nearly 100 miles inside Iraqi territory. And they continue to take prisoners of war. This one had no shoes when he gave up. Allied soldiers are amazed at how easily their enemy is surrendering.
The way these people are giving up, I don't know. It's just like taking candy from a baby. I don't know.
But as they become ever more entrenched in Iraq, the Allies are facing a difficult long-term dilemma. What happens if, despite this occupation, Saddam Hussein remains in power? When and how will these troops be able to leave? The Allies are hoping Saddam's own people will answer that question by toppling the Iraqi dictator. But if he survives, and he's outlasted most of his opponents over the years, what to do with these just established bases in Iraq could become a big problem for the Allies in the weeks and months ahead. Mike Chinoy, CNN in eastern Saudi Arabia.
The Allies say they now hold more than 30,000 Iraqi prisoners. One U.S. soldier remarked many of the Iraqis are relieved to be captured. Not all of the Iraqi soldiers who have given up the fight have surrendered to Allied forces. Some of them have made the difficult trip north to Turkey. Stefan Katsanis reports.
It was dark, it was dank, there was a heavy fog, but it was only partially due to the rain. A good deal of that fog was due to the oil fires that are burning in literally hundreds of oil wells, wellheads, refineries, and storage tanks around this country, leaving a thick, oily fog hanging in the air. The moon looked like a dirty thumbprint smeared across a piece of glass. You could barely see it. As we rolled in, we were met by several jubilant members of the Kuwaiti resistance, slapping us on the back, talking about how glad they were to see Americans, in fact, any presence here. But we arrived before any of the Allied forces started coming in. As we said, the Allied forces are now coming in. But until they arrived, law and order in the city was essentially being maintained by the Kuwaiti resistance. Some of the damage that was wrought, well, some of the burned out tanks bear witness to the violence that erupted around here from Allied airstrikes, Allied artillery, the pounding that they took as they retreated. Because we have to point out that all of the armored personnel carriers and tanks from the Iraqi army we saw had their turrets and their treads and their front ends headed north, going away from the onslaught and the Allied advance. We're told by some members of the Kuwaiti resistance that the sides of the roads were packed with marching Iraqi soldiers, and the resistance people claim that when one of these tanks was hit or went out of control, it would literally roll over the Iraqi infantry, crushing some of them under their treads, and the column would proceed out. We're led to understand that some Iraqi bodies are still in the streets near where we are, left from that scene yesterday. They describe it as a total rout, with the Iraqis leaving in confusion. We're led to believe that the Iraqi army here did not have any Republican guards in it, those elite combat troops you've heard so much about. We'll have to check that out over the next few days. The situation is still very fluid. Very few Allied troops have arrived here in town. They're taking up positions. There is literally years of cleanup that is going to go on, years of sorting out what was done to whom and when by the Iraqi forces. But right now, all we can tell you is that slightly before 7 in the morning here, the people of Kuwait seem awfully glad to see the Allied troops arrive here. Charles Jaco, CNN, reporting live, carrying pictures of the Emir of Kuwait, waving Kuwaiti flags, cheering. Of course, pictures of the Emir of Kuwait and those Kuwaiti flags have been frowned on. In fact, they've been illegal under Iraqi occupation because the Iraqis, of course, considered Kuwait to be the 19th province of Iraq and that the Emir was not a legitimate ruler. If the feeling I'm getting, and basically it is just an early morning feeling, but if the feeling I'm getting is anywhere near correct, this is just the beginning of the type of celebration that this city is going to see later today.
Okay, Charles Jaco, we thank you very much. And I note that you said that John Towers is running the camera, which is taking pictures of you and what we've seen here live from Kuwait City. That's an invaluable man here at CNN. He was one of the brains behind our coverage in Beijing.
A day-long advance from central Kuwait. They say they've destroyed more than 100 Iraqi tanks as they moved into the capital. But the United States maintains the Allies do not fully control the city yet, and there are pockets of Iraqi resistance. At last report, U.S. Marines were still fighting Iraqi troops for control of Kuwait's international airport. Allied forces also approached the abandoned American diplomatic compound in Kuwait City, but they decided against going in, thinking that Iraqi troops might have set booby traps. Charles Jaco is in Kuwait City, and he filed this report.
We have not seen any Allied forces. We're led to understand it's about 5 after 6 in the morning here, that within an hour, maybe two, the first Kuwaiti or Saudi Arabian tanks may start rolling into the city. We may or may not see them on this road we're on. Behind me, you may be able to see what's left of an Iraqi T-55 tank, a Soviet-made tank. It was apparently moving north, trying to get away from the Allied forces. Indeed, all the armored personnel carriers and tanks we've seen were moving north and were apparently hit by Allied artillery or airstrikes as they were trying to get away. When we drove into the city, we saw quite a bit of wrecked Iraqi armor. Hardly anyone on the street except for some people from the Kuwaiti resistance. You say you've taken a lot of Iraqi prisoners yourself?
Yeah, yesterday we were 6 and we were chasing 1,100 Iraqis, and we captured 16 of them, and we are putting them in our houses.
So how many Iraqi prisoners do you think you're holding waiting for the Allies to pick up?
Now, maybe thousands of them.
Thousands of
Yeah.
them? Now, what kind of fight did they put up? You've obviously been outnumbered and outgunned during the 7 months of occupation. When they decided to leave, was there much fighting between the resistance and the Iraqi forces?
No, not like that. Maybe it's just a little bit.
But not a great deal?
No. Sometimes they are fighting a lot.
Now, we'd heard a lot about atrocities, executions, torture, that kind of thing in the last couple of weeks. Is any of that true? What did the Iraqi troops do, if anything, to Kuwaiti people during the last week or so?
They were killing us just for no reason. They were chasing us. They were knocking out on our doors and taking our kids, our boys. They were taking our food, maybe just like monsters. You know, they were killing us. We don't know why.
So did you see any executions? Were people being executed by the Iraqis?
Yeah, many of them I saw. It's so horrible.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
As-salama. The situation now obviously is going to continue to develop here. As we said, we wait for the first coalition troops to arrive. As for reports that the U.S. Marines have arrived, no confirmation on that because it's frankly very hard to get around right now. You're not sure what's booby-trapped and what's not. Although, according to some of the resistance fighters, they say they believe the coalition has essentially overestimated the Iraqi army, that the Iraqi army did not seem to have a lot of fight left in it, and they may not have been as sophisticated or as well-trained as they thought they were. But again, when dawn comes up, and it's going to be kind of a hazy, oily dawn here because of these oil fires, maybe we can get a clearer picture of what's going on.
Shortly after this report, Jaco came into contact with Kuwaiti resistance fighters who said they had a mission.
We have a place here in Kuwait that usually in the 25th of February, which is the symbol day, we do it all the time. It's downtown, it's the same place, and we're going to do it again, like every year.
Planning to do it immediately, right away, or later this morning?
Well, I think it will take us 15 to 20 minutes or half an hour to get there. And whenever we get there, and hopefully we'll have the Kuwaiti people there and to raise the flag all together.
Allied forces are in western Iraq to try to block escape routes for Iraqi troops, especially the Republican Guards. They are reportedly having success. Pentagon sources say the U.S. Army's 24th Mechanized Infantry captured more than 50 Republican Guard tanks tonight near the Euphrates River. And in a driving rain, elements of the 7th Army Corps, including the famed Big Red 1 Division, are engaged in a prolonged tank battle with the Republican Guard. And American and French forces reportedly are halfway between the cities of Baghdad and Basra to cut off routes farther north. Iraqi traffic heading north out of Kuwait is said to be bumper to bumper and easy pickings for Allied warplanes. The Pentagon reports Allied forces have destroyed or neutralized half of Iraq's ground forces in Kuwait and have knocked out more than half of Baghdad's armored arsenal there. Media pool reports indicate French forces supported by U.S. artillery captured a key Iraqi air base south of Baghdad, and American officers report the French have moved into a nearby town. Reporters saw hundreds of earth-moving vehicles heading north, presumably to repair the air base's runways for Allied use. Some of Iraq's tanks have been victims of A-10 Thunderbolt warplanes and their Maverick missiles. 2 American pilots say they teamed to destroy 23 tanks in one day, despite heavy anti-aircraft fire. One of them credits the Army for forcing Republican Guard personnel out of hiding in southern Iraq. So many Iraqi troops are surrendering. One Allied commander says there are too many to count. At last report, the number was at least 30,000, including some who tried to kiss their captors' hands when they surrendered. One POW says he and his comrades lived on grass and rainwater for the last 28 days. Some of the POWs arrived with wounds. They were treated by Allied medics.
They're glad to be there. They also have a physician, a surgeon from Iraq that was a prisoner, and he's over there. He's helping the doctors and everything from in translating and everything else over there.
U.S. military officials now say 28 U.S. service personnel were killed in that Iraqi Scud attack on Saudi Arabia. 100 others were wounded when the missile hit a barracks and a mess hall. Scud debris hit the building when many soldiers were inside relaxing. The journalist says the missile hit less than a minute after air raid sirens sounded, and U.S. sources say no Patriot missiles were fired to intercept it. And that's all from the update desk. A hardline response from the United States, world reaction to the latest developments in the Gulf, coming up with you.
Battle of the war waged today in the Euphrates River Valley, with the Iraqis losing about 200 tanks. Another key battle in Kuwait City today went to the Allies. U.S. Marines penetrated Iraqi defenses there to retake the city's airport and to help liberate Kuwait City. The United Nations rejected the latest Iraqi peace offer, the recognition of some UN resolutions in exchange for a ceasefire. Like President Bush, council members insist Baghdad agree to all 12 UN resolutions. With the latest on the Gulf War, I'm Brian Anderson.